This woman who appears rather eerie is turning living people into zombies for amusement and writing 2 sentences on the faces of the zombies. The woman's name is Martha. In the early stages of the apocalypse, Martha's husband had a car accident and was impaled by a highway guardrail, piercing his chest. Martha kept comforting her husband, believing that someone would stop and help them. It was evident that they had a great relationship as a couple. Then the first car drove past them, and despite Martha's waving, the car was gone. And then the second car. And the third.
Stop!
Not a single car stopped to help them. Everyone was too busy trying to save themselves. Martha sat in front of the car, with a face full of disappointment. It was a feeling of helplessness that most people couldn't comprehend. Suddenly, a figure emerged from the woods. Martha thought it was someone passing by and was about to seek help.
My husband...
But to her surprise, it was a zombie. Martha was frightened and took up a tool from the ground to protect herself. Still, Martha continued to console her husband.
Someone will come. Someone will help us.
The night fell, and she still couldn't stop a single car. The next day, her husband had completely died and turned into a zombie. Martha tearfully picked up a piece of glass from the ground and personally gave her husband a final journey. Digging a grave to bury him, her mind started to distort, and she began to talk to herself.
Because he was a better... No!
However, not everyone in the apocalypse was selfish. There was an organization, formerly a logistics company, that knew the locations of vast amounts of supplies before the apocalypse. Every day, their members drove big trucks and left a cardboard box filled with survival supplies under road signs ending in the number 4. They wrote on the box, "Take what you need, leave what you don't." They hoped to help the survivors in the apocalypse. The woman who just placed the box was a member of that organization. She turned around and saw Martha with a long stick in her hand. Martha appeared unusually cold and indifferent in the face of the woman's concern, and she ended up killing her. This organization had many people who placed boxes under road signs ending in the number 4 every day, and Martha's task was to turn all of them into zombies and write the same sentence on the faces of the zombies as written on the boxes. Martha hated not the indifferent people but rather resented those who helped others. This is an extreme distortion of human nature. Martha also pretended to be a member of the organization to inquire about the locations of other members. This time, she accidentally contacted Morgan, who had just arrived at a gas station. For those who have watched the previous episodes, you would know that Morgan had a conversation with a woman at the gas station, and that woman was Martha. When Martha arrived at the gas station, Morgan had already gone to Texas. So, Martha followed him all the way to Texas. Using a public radio frequency, Martha overheard Naomi and the man arranging to meet at road sign number 27. Martha made some preparations at the sign beforehand. Later, she discarded the old toy and turned the man into a new toy. Don't ask why she killed. Her husband's death drove her to the extreme. Not only did she kill those who helped others, but she also aimed to kill those who accepted help from others. Naomi realized something was wrong and, together with Morgan, arrived at the scene to investigate. However, there was no one there, not even Althea's armored vehicle, which had been taken. Wendell and Jim stayed beside the truck, chatting. At that moment, Jim noticed a zombie behind Wendell. Jim was timid and had never killed a zombie, but Wendell remained calm and activated the wheelchair's switch. Wendell calmly handed the tool in his hand to Jim and asked him to kill the zombie. When Jim hesitated, Sarah walked over and effortlessly dealt with the zombie. Soon, Jim realized that something was amiss. As Morgan and the others had returned, the zombie's face was covered in words, the same phrase they were familiar with: "Take what you need, leave what you don't." Naomi picked up the radio again and called the man. This time, Martha answered the radio. Martha didn't say her name. She said, "I'm just making the men less weak." When Morgan heard the voice on the radio, he was surprised because it sounded familiar. He asked if she was the woman by the boxes during the day. Martha heard Morgan's voice and became interested. Morgan was shocked that the woman knew his name. Naomi also looked around cautiously, feeling the sensation of being watched, which was unsettling. "Althea said she must have taken my armored car and watched your tapes." Morgan asked Martha, "What do you want?" Martha said, "I want you to stop your actions. Helping others only makes people weaker, especially you." Morgan, "Put away your kindness. and you will become stronger than ever before. The next day, Wendell and his sister led the group to the place where they had stolen the truck, as Morgan had convinced them to return it. However, they couldn't find anyone there. Naomi also left a box with the same sentence written on it at that location. Morgan looked at the box and then wrote another sentence, stating that if help was needed, they could contact Channel 4. They believed that it was no longer safe to use the public frequency because there was a deranged woman lurking in the shadows. Next, they felt it was crucial to find Alicia and Victor. Of course, Althea was solely focused on retrieving her armored vehicle. So how are the people separated by the storm doing? In this post-apocalyptic world plagued by a scarcity of resources and infested with zombies, should we extend a helping hand to others? Luciana spotted a zombie leaning against a car window from a distance, indicating that someone was trapped inside the vehicle. Surviving in this post-apocalyptic world for so long, dealing with individual zombies was still relatively easy for Luciana. She opened the car door to find an elderly man trapped inside, fortunately alive. Luciana glanced at his injuries and noticed that the car's frame was pressing against Clayton's thigh. "I can help you," Luciana said. Clayton appeared kind and replied, "I've been stuck here since the storm hit." Luciana then attempted to pry open the car's console with a tool, but Clayton started experiencing pain. "I know you want to save me, and I appreciate your willingness to help a stranger, but you can't save me," Clayton said. "If you pry it open, I might die even faster." Luciana felt somewhat defeated, but after a moment of thought, she asked, "Do you have any unfinished wishes or any family members you want to find?" Clayton revealed that he was all alone in this world now, and his only remaining wish was to have a drink. Luciana found something she could do for Clayton. She gave him a walkie-talkie to stay in touch and assured him that she would find the drink he desired. Luciana closed the car door, uncertain of where she could find alcohol, and left to try her luck. It's been over 2 years since the end of the world, and the survivors have taken almost everything the town could use. Just when Luciana thought she had found the alcohol, it turned out to be a bottle of juice. Feeling dejected, Luciana walked along the road. She had searched the entire town to no avail. "She's a little depressed at this point." Clayton comforted Luciana and expressed his gratitude, saying that nobody does such things anymore in this apocalyptic world. Clayton also shared his pre-apocalypse experience, mentioning how he had left his family behind to come to this remote place for work. When the apocalypse arrived, all his loved ones perished. To make up for it, he chose to help the living. Though Luciana couldn't help him, Clayton encouraged her to assist other survivors. With Clayton's encouragement, Luciana's spirits lifted a bit. Surprisingly, a box appeared by the roadside not far away. Luciana looked around but didn't see anyone. She opened the box to find various survival supplies, and a note on top read, "If you need help, contact Channel 4. What brought even more joy to Luciana was the presence of a bottle of alcohol, secretly placed there by Jim. It indirectly fulfilled Clayton's wish and helped Luciana. Clayton, who had thought he would spend his final moments inside the car, saw Luciana's return in the rearview mirror. This added color to his last moments of life.
You don't give up.
Luciana said, "I watched my loved one, Nick, die in front of me, unable to do anything. I won't let that happen again." Clayton finally tasted the flavor he had missed and thanked Luciana. "I have something for you too," he said. "Behind the car, there's a notebook with the location where I left supplies. I hope it can help you." Luciana asked what kind of job led him to leave his family. Clayton simply smiled and replied, "I was just a truck driver." In the end, Clayton passed away peacefully. Helping Clayton meant a lot to Luciana. She took up the walkie-talkie and tuned it to Channel 4, saying, "Whoever left the box, if you're listening, thank you for what you've done for others. It means a lot." Just as Luciana was getting sentimental, a voice came out of the intercom.
Morgan?
Luciana, is that you?
What Luciana didn't know was that the truck was the same one Clayton had been driving. Clayton has been helping strangers by leaving boxes on the side of the road, but the truck was stolen by the Wendell siblings, and then they met Morgan. They continued what Clayton had been doing. If Clayton knew that others were influenced by his actions in doing the same, and that his last wish for alcohol was indirectly fulfilled through the box, he would be immensely pleased. At that moment, a voice came through Morgan's walkie-talkie. It was Charlie and Alicia, who had seen the message on the box.
We don't know who left it there. There could be a trap.
Hey, where are you?
Hello, we're here.
Morgan?
Alicia said, We found a box at the 84-kilometer mark. Morgan, relieved to know they were safe, smiled and said, "We're in the north. We'll come back to pick you up." But Martha's voice also came through the walkie-talkie. Morgan grabbed the walkie-talkie and said to Martha in a determined voice, "Helping others doesn't make us weak. I won't give up on helping and searching for others. It only makes us stronger. I used to be like you, but we need to change." Martha, on the other hand, has a look of disdain on her face. Just then, a voice came from the driver's cabin. "Sarah, the driver, asked Althea, 'What does your armored vehicle look like?'" They realized that there was an armored vehicle following them from behind. They knew that the deranged woman had taken the armored vehicle earlier, so its presence here meant trouble. Morgan rushes to ask what you're really up to. Martha told Morgan with her actions,
I'm making you strong. You lose people. You lose yourself.
Alicia, listening to the conversation on the walkie-talkie, knew that they must be in trouble. I don't know how long it took for Morgan and Naomi to sit up. The truck had come to an emergency stop, and fortunately no one in the compartment was hurt, but the petrol had started to leak. The 3 people in the driver's cabin were still alive, although Sarah had been hit in the arm. At that moment the armored car came again from the front, and they were so frightened that they got down again. Only Althea knew that the ammunition in the vehicle had been depleted. Inside the truck, they felt helpless. Wendell prepared to do something, but his wheelchair was badly damaged from the impact. Morgan and Naomi supported each other as they got out of the truck. However, Althea's first action upon exiting was to confront Martha, while Naomi tried to persuade her not to act recklessly. As soon as Althea opened the door, she was pushed to the ground, and zombies lunged towards Naomi. Martha directly fired at Althea, who narrowly evaded the bullets but suffered from ringing ears due to the deafening sound. Morgan pleaded with Martha not to harm them, attempting to sway her with words, but Martha clearly wasn't buying into it. Naomi was still struggling to hold off the zombies, while Althea tried to retrieve a weapon to fight back. In the end, it was Wendell who came to the rescue. Seizing the opportunity, Morgan quickly eliminated the zombies. However, Martha rose again, and the shotgun's limited power from the distance only caused superficial injuries. At that moment, the truck's front end caught fire, startling Sarah and Jim.
On the asphalt!
Then there was a huge explosion and the boxes that were supposed to help the others were reduced to ashes. The loud noise attracted more zombies to the scene. Martha closed the door and drove away once again, faced with an overwhelming number of zombies. All they could do was run. Half an hour later, 2 figures arrived at the devastated location, Charlie and Alicia. Only a few zombie corpses remained, with no sign of the others. Charlie said there was a chance they were still alive, but Alicia was pessimistic and didn't want to look at the bright side. Alicia led Charlie back the way they came, leaving the area. Meanwhile, Morgan and the others found themselves in an even worse situation, with an increasing horde of zombies closing in from behind. Due to Wendell's condition, their speed was not fast enough. Although zombies were slow, they never tired. Now, Morgan and the group had no choice but to find a place to temporarily hide. Morgan pointed in a direction and said, "There's a hospital over there. Let's seek refuge there." Unbeknownst to them, this decision would plunge them into yet another crisis, while Jim believed that continuing forward was the right choice. The sight of so many zombies made him choose to follow the others. Upon reaching the hospital, the situation didn't improve. More and more zombies converged from all directions. Morgan also realized that he had made a wrong decision. They were trapped there. Wendell and Althea explored the other rooms and found several functional walkie-talkies. Fortunately, there were no zombies here. Morgan quickly looked for something to block the door again. At that moment, Jim approached Morgan and thanked him for saving him multiple times. Morgan, preoccupied with the situation, didn't have time for small talk. The door was already starting to loosen, unable to hold back the approaching footsteps of the zombies. The zombies flooded in like a tide. Morgan went upstairs and told them they needed to leave this place. However, Althea and the others had already explored the other exits, and they were filled with zombies. At this point, Jim stepped up and accused Morgan, saying, "How are you a leader? First, we were used as targets by Martha, and now you've brought us to this dangerous place. You said it was safe here, but it's because of you that we're in this situation." Silence fell upon them all. They had expected a heated argument, but Morgan simply said, "Move upwards." They arrived at a compartment on the 2nd floor, and Morgan knocked on the door. the zombies inside immediately responded, forcing them to continue going upstairs. The zombies from downstairs started following them up the stairs. The third floor also had zombies beckoning to them, so they had no choice but to keep moving upstairs. When they reached the fourth floor, Morgan tapped the floor, but no zombies appeared. The others followed him inside. However, the zombies on the third floor had learned to open doors and were slowly making their way upstairs. They had to search for items once again to block the hallway door. On the other side of the hallway, there were also many zombies. The situation became extremely awkward. If the hallway door couldn't hold back the zombies, they would have no escape. The only option now was to go to the top floor, but the staircase was blocked not only by zombies but also collapsed, rendering it impassable. Naomi, who used to work at a hospital, mentioned that hospitals usually have a generator in the storage room. They could use the elevator to reach the top floor. Althea and Sarah volunteered to open the generator, believing that Morgan would ensure that everyone got on the elevator. As Morgan and Jim were preparing to gather at the elevator, they encountered several zombies. Jim quickly backed away. Morgan managed to kill one zombie, but the others pinned him against the wall. Jim stood there, dumbfounded. A zombie lunged at Jim. Jim, who had never killed a zombie before, picked up a pair of surgical pliers and stabbed the zombie in the neck. The zombies pushed Jim over and smashed the door glass. Jim used his left hand to hold the zombie's neck and prepared to pick up the surgical pliers again to save himself. Fortunately, Jim finally got hold of the surgical pliers and stabbed the zombie in the head. Jim gasped for air, and Morgan rushed over, relieved to see that Jim was okay. Althea and Sarah had also reached the storage room, but they were being chased by numerous zombies. Althea and Sarah say the generator needs someone to start it, but there's no need for both to be stuck here. Althea says now that the zombies aren't here yet, you go and meet the others. Sarah quickly ran towards the elevator. Althea turned around and closed the door to the storage room. Luciana and Wendell on the other side were barely holding on. As more and more zombies gathered outside the door, they quickly retreated and joined Morgan at the elevator. Morgan urgently asked Althea if everything was alright. Althea responded that it would be done soon. At this moment, zombies from both sides were surrounding the elevator. Jim kept pressing the elevator button continuously. When Morgan called Althea again on the walkie-talkie, there was no response. The zombies were getting closer, and they were almost out of options. Even the composed Morgan uttered a curse. They had no choice but to join forces and fight the zombies. Just as the zombies were about to reach them, the overhead light turned on, signaling that Althea had finally started the generator. They hurriedly retreated into the elevator, and luckily, the doors closed completely just in time. It was a close call. There were too many zombies for them to handle. They reached the rooftop, which was surprisingly safe with no zombies around. Sarah used the walkie-talkie to contact Althea, but there was no response. Jim immediately checked the emergency ladder, but unfortunately, it was damaged. Naomi, who had worked as a nurse before the apocalypse, saw that Jim had been scratched by the glass and offered to help clean his wound. Jim said, "My waist was also scratched by the glass." Naomi lifted his shirt.
You didn't get cut by glass.
What?
Naomi froze. She said, "Very sorry you were not cut by glass." Jim was also shocked, unable to believe that his journey in the apocalypse, as a master brewer, might come to an end. Seeing Jim's despair, they all felt a sense of sadness. Morgan felt even more guilty for not saving Jim immediately and for leading them into a dangerous situation. Although they were temporarily safe on the rooftop, the question of how to leave remained unsolved.